David, and welcome to the Hollow Black Podcast.
Good evening.
This is what our third or fourth third show,
Third show.
third
Third
show,
show.
and we promise to make sure we get you all on a consistent basis and track record as we line this stuff up. And one, we want to thank you all for really supporting us
Absolutely.
because we've been hearing you all talk about the podcast, and we've been getting people
Yeah.
who we didn't know would be watching and
All
paying
kinds of
attention.
stories. All kinds of stories. Indeed.
And so typically what we're going to do is look for the idea is for us to shoot on the second and maybe fourth Tuesday of the month, from
Yeah.
7 to 8, as we grow and discuss and look to start bringing on some guests. And then you can also find us live on YouTube and Facebook at the Holla Black Podcast with David and Jason. You can follow us on the YouTube. We're asking that you subscribe to those and also chime in because we would love to hear how you all think about the episodes and the shows and some of the wisdom that I get from my partner in crime, a man who I love dearly, who we get along so wonderful, y'all. It's like a brother, man. Even though he a Q and I'm an alpha, you all, we have so much fun. And I
Indeed.
just want to thank the Reverend Attorney David Hart for really asking me to do this with you, man.
Yeah, man. I'm grateful for this, and I think we are we're doing exactly as we're being called to do.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
And
All right.
so one of the things that we want to talk about, and before we get into the topic, man, I just want to
Yeah.
remind people of what the Hollow Black Podcast is about.
All right.
Because I posted some of your wisdom snippets and some of mine, and some folk didn't take too kindly to it.
Indeed.
They
That's true.
called us race baiters, and I said that's not what we do. I mean, first of all, I didn't get into it with them because I don't argue with people, man. I just don't do that.
Indeed.
But when we wanted to do this, it was to have an intellectual, honest discussion around things that affect the Black community.
Absolutely.
And when you came, just so people know, you're an attorney, you're a reverend, man. And when you thought about this idea, what was the thesis behind it and the rationale for why we should do it?
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really, I just like chopping it up with you. I mean, so that was like primary. Second, I think there is a gap in our information in Black folk. I think we need to be looking at the church. We need to be looking at religious issues, salient issues from a Black lens. And I just think, particularly in this region in Wisconsin, I think we're missing that, and I think we're filling that void. I think in these three episodes we have certainly hit on some topics that we're not hearing.
Right.
So that was just the impetus, and then we were just in the midst of a historic election,
Yes.
and I have, as we said in earlier podcasts, I have been a follower of Kamala and her genius, and just really, just really the work that she has done in California, and wanted to see her as president. And we still may see that happening. I believe that may still happen. But we were seeing, I think we were seeing during the election season just a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation, and I said, if she gets elected, we're going to need somebody month by month, perhaps even week by week, to say this is what she's done. These are
Right.
her accomplishments. This is what the path ahead looks like. So in 4 years, when it's time to reelect her, we're not facing the same things that we're facing right this second. And if she lost, and she didn't win the election or get the most votes, then it's time to hold the people who were elected accountable for what they said, and that they were going to do, and what they said that they weren't going to do. So that's why I think in essence, that's why we're here.
I love the fact that when you brought it about and we talked, it was about, real, for the most part, looking at real information and making sense of that information.
Indeed,
Because
yes.
regardless of what side on you're on, but to have a real honest discussion about some of these myths. And I know we want to talk about some of this urban versus rural, the
Hmm.
myths that continue to feed into that. But I think it's also hard because sometimes when you start speaking truth to power, it comes across as race baiting. It comes across
Indeed.
as, hey, listen, we've seen this before. For example, one of the things that's been bothering me lately is now you have questions about, well, how much money she spent.
Yeah.
And you and I both know from politics, everybody spends money. And it was almost as if she would have won, would we be having these same discussions about, well, it was mismanagement or they spent too much money? And what I notice is that the headlines and articles that I'm seeing is, well, she spent too much money with Oprah Winfrey's production and all
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
as if Oprah and her crew is supposed to work for free.
Like it's the Chitlin Circuit, brother. It was. I mean, in our community, of course, we we made jokes about it that but it really relies on um, tropes, stereotypes of Black women,
Mm-hmm.
that and spending habits, and it again, more disgust, more outrage. It's just not helpful. But uh, instead of celebrating the fact that a political candidate unified uh,
A number of
a
people.
number of us, got young people to vote, got people excited for the first time, really since 2008, and really for the first time, for the first time in many years for folks. Um, Instead of focusing on that, we focused on whether or not she was appropriately spending money. That question has never been asked of a
It has
of a
not.
of a of a an Anglo man, not ever. It has never been asked, and so clearly we have some issues.
And what bothers me about a lot of this is it's the same playbook from those people who are either one trying to play on the fears
No doubt.
that feed into this urban versus rural stuff. And I liken it to the example when I ran for comptroller, right? One of the reporters, it was me, white woman, and a young white guy. And the guy wrote in there, and it was like he said he made the statement, well, Jason will get a pay raise. And I looked at everybody's salary. Everybody in that race would have got a pay raise. And so I told the reporter, I said, how is it you just focused on me
That's right.
when in fact everybody in that race would have received a pay raise based on that job description and that job position?
That's right.
And so I find that really odd that you felt the need to point it out with
For
just
me.
me,
For me.
nobody else.
Yeah.
And had she would have won, would have been a genius move,
Hmm.
or now are we looking at
Hmm.
these things?
Hmm.
And I think it always goes to the fact that no matter what we do, and it's hard, I believe, for Black folks and people of color and women to really have a fair shake. But then when you start speaking to it, people want to act as if, well, no, you're a sour loser, you're a
Right.
sore loser, or you mismanage. When everybody in this race, everybody in every political race,
That's right.
the same things could be said across the board.
No doubt. No doubt. I think. I mean, I wasn't in her day to day operations, but it looked like to me that she spent her time, her money wisely. Um, that she traveled when it was necessary, sent surrogates out when it was necessary. I think her ad spending was
Yeah.
was effective. It was you. How much money do you need to spend to counter you know deeply seated racist tropes? If every, I mean, we've known about this dude for a decade. We know. I mean, you can't say that you can't say that you actually like this dude. You can't say that. And so there has to be something else.
When you begin to look at data, and I know people will say, someone said, well, she lost. And again, I want to start us, I'm moving on to a different discussion, but we
Right.
did talk about this, and I think it's still relevant because in 2 years or 4 years, or the state politics, local politics, depending on who's running,
Right.
we'll be hearing the same discussions, we'll
That's
be
right.
hearing the same things.
That's right.
And so I think it's important and imperative that people like you and I call attention to this stuff. So number one, we can go, hey, listen, you all can sit here and act as if race didn't have something to do with it.
That's right.
But the data says otherwise.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and your experience as an elected official in a state office is a little different than mine, but it's perhaps the same. Because sometimes even our own folks hold us to different
Yes,
standards.
they do.
I know in when I was
Which
running.
would have been the case had she not spent money with
That's
black
right.
people.
That's
And
right.
it should have
Isn't
been
that the
they
truth?
and we should have,
That's so true.
you know.
That's so true. That's so true. I remember I've run campaigns and I was helping with Henry Sanders, who is
Mhm.
Madison 365 publisher and leader, and he was running for lieutenant governor, but before that I was helping him out with his 81st assembly district race. And he helped me manage my campaign
Mhm.
for alder in my home district, and I returned the favor. But we both observed and noticed that when we were knocking on doors and raising money and going to these uh, candidate interviews for endorsement in political organizations, we noticed that they don't, that folks they expect us to have I mean, a mastery of the issues,
Yes,
and,
they
and
do.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yes, they do.
That I mean, there was, folks who would be, when I was on the trail, folks would be like, why is it so important for you? I mean, I when I was running, I knew the ins and outs of every single regional issue, county, city issue, even the ones that we weren't going to even touch on,
That's right.
because I knew knocking on those doors, it didn't matter whether they knew it. It didn't matter whether they could speak to it, but they wanted to make sure that I could speak to it more than my candidate could.
Mhm.
I remember being in in candidate forums and debate forums where the moderators would call me. It was two districts. There were two districts that were having debates and forums, and the other person that was running was a black man, a person of color, and they couldn't stop calling us each other's names. I mean, so
In the forum.
in the form, in absolutely in the form. So there's an expectation that we absolutely have a mastery of the issue, that there's just a certain level of scrutiny. I mean, I just barely passed the qualifications test, and I just had a laundry list of degrees, and had been working on these policy issues for in the city, at the city level, and all of these things. But that's what happens with black candidates, is that we're just held to a different standard. So yeah.
I wonder if this. I think this is a good intro into our discussion. This
Man,
urban.
before
Yep.
we get started, man,
Yeah.
I want uh I think also segues the subway case in New York City.
Yeah. Please enlighten us,
Man,
man.
I just want to hear, what I'm saying. I just want to chop it up with you a little bit about that, but also this CEO murder. I mean, we got a business
Woo!
exec.
You
We
you
got
you
we
you
got a
go
we,
you gonna go hard today, huh?
we got a business exec. I couldn't let you off the hook, brother.
You gonna go hard today, huh?
Couldn't let you off the hook. I know you wanted to have a good civil, intellectual, cerebral discussion, but we gonna have to get grimy, brother. So I want to hear.
The see, I hate to say it, right? Because I don't condone, nor do I believe this kind of stuff should take place. But there's a part of me that's not surprised
Yes, sir.
around the CEO position, and I'll tell you why. About 4 or 5 years ago, when I was Tasha and I was trying to get some life insurance, man,
Hmm.
and by this time the politics started to get so visceral
Right.
from a lot of sides. And I remember the insurance person asked me, "Well, what do you do?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, I'm an elected official."
Right.
And she said, "We don't cover."
Oh my goodness.
We don't. Now I used to sell life
That's
insurance,
right.
brother,
That's right.
and it used to be
As
we
you said,
don't.
we're not gonna take
We
your
not go
money. We
if
just
you
not
jumping
gonna.
out of a plane, if
Right.
you doing skydiving, we not go. You too much of a risk.
Wow.
And when she said we don't cover, because it's being a politician is now a
Wow.
hazardous position.
Wow.
For a moment, I got scared, bro,
Wow.
because it was the realization that society and world and
That's real.
people are moving to a point where the trust
Indeed.
the the kind of politicians are in it for themselves that you see,
That's right.
that now somebody may somebody may look at you
Mm-hmm.
as,
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't be there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's gotten to that point. And so I think when you start looking at CEO salaries,
Mm-hmm.
and you start seeing people are compensated $21 million a year, and you're laying off 300-400 people,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
um
Record profits.
Record profits, insurance CEOs, as is this case, you're getting paid that kind of money. And again, I don't condone it. I think I'm not surprised that society in us, that you have some people who became so distraught, if that's the case, or you have some people who feel as if the people who are in power and positions really don't care. And so again, you're looking at insurance CEOs,
Mm-hmm.
and you got insurance companies denying people, man, for treatments that they know they need,
That's right.
that the insurance companies can afford.
That's right.
And you're watching a person rake in dollars that you all are paying, and in the meantime, you watching somebody, a loved one, die.
That's right.
Um, I don't think that that's the way to handle it.
That's right.
But I can understand how people get to a point where, what else can we do?
Mm-hmm.
When they don't have God in their life, man. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if the young brother did or not, but I wasn't surprised, because I think I started seeing things that led us up to these moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid that if we don't begin to really go and embrace, hey, Jesus said, love your neighbor,
That's
man.
right.
That means if you're in these positions where you can receive some of these salaries, yeah, I understand you have to protect the bottom line, but where
Mm-hmm.
does the, hey, I want my legacy to be one where we help people? Where does
That's
that
right.
come in at?
That's right. That's right. I mean, the past the debate for certainly the past 30 years, but definitely the last 10 years has been that, and it's been about defining what neighbor is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are comfortable, I mean, if you say that you're a follower of Jesus Christ in the gospel, and you say that you believe, in the teachings, um, you're either going to have to say that you don't believe that the scriptures actually say that and mean that, or you're going to have to say, yeah, they do, but I'm just not going to follow that
Mm-hmm.
piece. And so which one is it, and what is it? Just that piece about this matter, this whole matter has gotten me. What what uh what what's I mean, I'm hearing stories of uh of this man's healthcare uh, uh, company cutting off anesthesia in the middle of surgeries, and just all kinds of really really wicked and evil
Yeah,
stuff. Does the man does did the man deserve to die? Absolutely
absolutely.
not.
Right.
Absolutely not. They're making this man a folk hero. Now, there's certainly a racial element to this.
I was, it has to be,
There's certainly a racial element to
because
this.
if the perpetrator was the
Man, my
different,
goodness, my goodness.
and again, you have to call this out, right?
That's right.
Because we've seen it, we've lived it,
That's
we've
right.
seen it, that the hypocrisy
That's
and
right.
double standards,
That's right.
to where if this person was you or me,
That's right.
this 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 would not be a kumbaya sort
That's right.
of. And this is where I think a lot of people forget and don't understand. It's like the methamphetamine and the opioid
That's right.
pandemic
That's right.
compared with the crack pandemic
Indeed.
when it hit our communities.
That's right.
And certain people going to understand why we were like, wait a second, it's not
Yeah.
that we don't have empathy, but where was this same empathy when it was us
That's right.
being?
Now all of a sudden
Now
it's an
we want
epidemic.
programs.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
got to secure funding
That's right.
because this is affecting older white men.
That's right.
And now it's a problem.
That's right. And your children.
Yeah.
And your children. That's
Now
right.
it's a problem.
That's
And
right.
so I do think it's an element of that, and we can't deny that. And to anybody who does, you just haven't been paying attention to American history,
You
man.
or you've been paying attention, and you just choose to see this another way.
Were you surprised at how this turned into? And again, I'm not saying the gentleman was a bad guy. I don't know that, but the almost folklore approach to this CEO
Yeah,
being taken
yeah,
versus,
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
what triggered all of this?
yeah, yeah.
What where should we be taking a moment and going, hey, if people are getting to this point,
That's right.
and this guy, you have to go, he's not the only person that feels the way he's felt. Now he
That's
might be
right.
the only person that so has acted on it,
Right.
but it's a plethora of people who can understand his sentiment.
That's right. I mean, how many black folk have we heard, or been with or sat with in our own families that have had stories that of insurance that has been less than kind to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we certainly I haven't heard of us turning to the gun and
Right.
and doing this, but absolutely, so yeah. I mean, on one hand, I am shocked that this man turned to murder. I don't. I mean, you know, during this trial, I believe, from my perspective, I believe he'll absolutely go to trial.
Mm-hmm.
I believe his attorneys will clean him up, and then we're going to hear a lot of details about his life, and about how redeemable he is, um, and that he may even be mentally challenged
Right.
to the point where that mitigates some of this. But I love writing think pieces. I love writing, and some of my colleagues uh, like to like to write about how, not necessarily post-racial, but we shouldn't be in a place where, as black folk, where where we're watching the TV. We should, we're sighing a moment of relief when we see a suspect in a national case or an international case, or a case of some note. Isn't The suspect isn't black, but because of all we've experienced, we're continuing to go through. Every time we see, a Boston bomber,
Mm-hmm.
or a strangler, or something like this,
That's right.
every
That's
most
right.
black households are still breathing a sigh of relief when we see that the suspect is white and it's not us.
I wonder from in talking about the other case, and this is the where the gentleman just got found not guilty for the chokehold. If I'm correct, that's the one you're referring to.
That's right, Penny.
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 And the you look at the perpetrator and you look at the victims,
That's
and
right.
you see the difference in our legal system. Because you, as an attorney, and I'm so glad you went into that. I think you gave us the blueprint for how, when the perpetrator is a white male Caucasian,
Hmm.
they clean them up, they
Hmm.
do all this, they paint the picture.
Hmm.
Does that happen when the perpetrator is a black, when the perpetrator is a black man?
That didn't even happen with OJ. They didn't.
Mm,
I mean, there are not the same legal advantages. There are probably some, because you have access to skillful attorneys, and
that's right.
attorneys who have been doing this a while and are good at what they do. But there aren't those same advantages, uh, when you're a black man, even with money, or a black person, a black woman, in particular. Excuse me. Kyle Rittenhouse faked up tears in that scene. I mean, we watched him fake up tears.
That's right.
And he mocked tears up, and then went and sat back down, and stopped. The crying automatically stopped, and they made him out to be. I mean,
A hero.
I watched the way that I knew that there was going to be an acquittal. I mean, they had already started characterizing him as a good kid and all
Mm-hmm.
this, that, and the other. But during the trial, when that judge uh, didn't allow him to be handcuffed and shackled, and he was down on the floor of the,
Is that normal?
absolutely not, absolutely not. If you go and spend a day in a courtroom in almost any county in our region, You will not see that. You will see defendants move into the court. If they're in custody, they are shackled from head to toe.
What leads up to a judge making that kind of call to
You
say where I'm not going to treat this person like we normally treat
right.
people?
Well, what I mean, the formula is simple. Serious crime, where there's lifetime or many years or decades of incarceration, plus a young white kid, mostly male, plus plus humanity. I think that all equals acquittal or better treatment, human treatment.
Mhm.
When I saw that judge come down from the bench, and they were looking, he was at counsel's table with the attorneys lined up and with Rittenhouse there, and the judge was there, and they were all looking in, and he was unshackled, and he was being treated like it was this is grandpa. I said, this is going to be absolutely going to be an acquittal. I mean, that was prejudicial.
Right.
You are, you're not, as judge, you're not supposed to, um, send any inkling to the jury that you feel one way or another about a case.
Which would have been communicated
That's
simply by the way you.
absolutely. It was communicated to me. It was communicated to many. When you are sitting at counsel table with an unshackled defendant, unlike and maybe, I mean, they do unshackle you
Mhm.
for for some trials, but but that scene told it all. But in this case, in this New York subway case, uh, they started this a year ago, making, I mean,
The spin.
right, that he's a veteran, and that
Hmm.
he's a this, and I mean, no other individual on that subway touched any individual except that man. That the victim hadn't touched anybody. The victim hadn't bothered anybody. I mean, hadn't messed with folk. It was just
Just that
just the
officer.
defendant. Yeah, just the defendant.
Since we're talking about this, and it leads, and I'm glad we're talking about these kinds of cases and issues, because one, I think a lot of people will like to hear about it, and this, particularly from your point of view, when you look at, you know, I see now there's this whole support and some rah rah rooting that Biden appointed over 60 African American judges, things of that nature. Do you think that will have some kind of, and I don't want it to be in a sense where I don't want to come across like, hey, now black people gonna get off free, but is it more of a reaction that now that we have certain people on the bench, now maybe we gonna get a fair shake? Is that, as a lawyer, as a black attorney who saw the appointment of those black judges, how do you look at that?
I mean, there's some room for optimism. There's some room for optimism. I wouldn't uh, have been, and will be a prosecutor, um, if I didn't believe that it would be possible to change things from within.
Mhm.
So there's some room for optimism, but there has to be real and systemic change.
Right.
You have to get people who are justice minded and fair minded in in those positions, and you have to start really changing the community to support these decisions. Kamala Harris really did a lot of.
Doing that.
I mean, she did a lot of work. She said, I'm not going to seek the death penalty.
That's right.
I'm not going to seek the death penalty in cases. And she stood on that. And I mean, even when there was a person who was charged with murdering a police officer, she said, I'm not going to seek the death penalty. I don't, but so there has to be a community that supports her, and there has to be a community that supports these black judges, these black prosecutors, these black, this, and they, I got to say it. We got to be right minded.
Hmm.
Just because we got black skin don't mean
That
we
don't mean that's right.
right. Skin folk and kinfolk all the time.
When we're looking at this and all of these this elections, and I think going to as we move forward and you look at these cases particularly, the question for me is always, well, you know, these people who end up doing these things like the Kyle Rittenhouse and normally these folks, like you said before, there is a biased sense of judgment that you would so openly treat someone of a different race and culture completely different. Um, and to the point where it's almost as if you're on this person's side. One of the things that we want to talk about is some of these differences, man. And do you believe some of these stem from these stereotypes because somebody we're in these urban areas versus some of these rural areas?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. I remember. I remember. I was in the Department of Justice, and I guess I can call it a name. I can call it out. I was in the Department of Justice, and I was trying a case actually in your county,
Hmm.
your home county, and I remember a person, a staff support person. I won't say the actual title, but a staff support person. Uh, we were choosing a jury, and we were, I really like the science of picking juries. That's how I win cases.
Hmm.
It's not always about evidence. It's not.
Is
There's
that
a
do we not understand that as a community that I think we
oh
understand on the negative
oh I
side?
think I think I think I think
Yeah.
we're woefully unready to to deal with that truth. Um, Picking juries is 80% of the work. Um, if you can get the right, I think before I left the public defender's office in Milwaukee, I think I lost maybe one or two cases.
Mm.
Um, every 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 case that I won, I was able to engineer a jury that was that I knew would at least listen to the case. The two that I lost, I know that they had a disfavorable opinion of my client, and we can overcome that. But there were people that I just couldn't get off the jury.
Hmm.
They were just that particular pool. I just couldn't get enough people off the jury to make the pool one that was palatable
Now,
to
how
us.
does that work? Because now I'm very intrigued, man.
Indeed,
Like, how
indeed.
does that work when? And I think everybody who's listening now is really will tune in because I don't think podcasts cover this kind of stuff. Or
Mm,
how when you go in to pick a jury,
indeed.
do you get what the how does that happen? Do you get information on this person? Does it tell you what they like so that you know
Yeah,
this is a no?
in Wisconsin, I mean, unless you have like a lot of money and you can hire a jury consultant, you're just sitting there, and what you get is you don't even really get their you get I think you get their name, but we're all sitting there, and we don't get their names until the morning, so we can't
Look
do a
at
lot.
them.
but but if you have just enough time, and you have a paralegal or an
Hmm.
assistant or something, you
Who
can
has to be good?
that's right, you can run a few of them through Facebook,
Okay,
and
so
see
you know what
social
you're
media,
dealing with.
right. But mostly it's not it's this is a science. It's not, people try to work on hunch, and just because they're a teacher they don't do this, and just because they're this and they don't do this. Yeah, you have to ask, these psychologically based questions. um, you know um, yeah, it's very much a science. I don't want to give up
Yep.
I don't want to give it too much, but you really have to listen, to what people are saying. You have to listen to what people are not saying. uh, 90% of this is body language, what people are saying with their body.
Hmm.
And you just have to. I have found in the dozens of trials that I've tried, and the jury trials that I've had, um, that people will tell on themselves, through their body language. But most, so and that's why it's very difficult for me to be in many settings, because, well, first, my spirit of discernment, just,
Right.
but it's just easy to tell people
Who?
who are not telling the truth, because I've just watched it.
Right.
I've been an attorney for 25 years. I just watched people who are not telling me the truth. And their body language will say a certain
Yeah.
thing, their mouths will say a certain thing. But most people are raised to not be able to lie.
Mhm.
So their verbal cues will tell, their facial language, their body language
Yeah.
will tell. And so you can shape a jury in such a way, and so when you see certain shifts and certain things happening, you can start to whittle away at the people who are absolutely not going to be right for you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what their profession is. I mean, sometimes that gives you an understanding. Sometimes law enforcement are this, and sometimes teachers are that, and sometimes
Right.
engineers and IT professionals are this and that. But it's really human nature is just. I mean, they're just tells. People always tell on themselves through those mechanisms. Absolutely.
And not that I wonder, but as I'm listening to you, this whole and I'm hoping we can come back with the farmer
Man,
that we
we
want.
got about 5 minutes left, brother.
Right.
I'm
I
so
know.
sorry.
I'm
I'm so
hoping we
sorry,
can come
brother.
back with
I
the
know.
farm.
I'm so sorry, brother.
No, but I love the
I
idea
took you.
that because one of the things we wanted to get into more was this urban versus rural myth, and hopefully we'll get into more of that discussion with the farmer. But
Yes, sir.
the significance of just how in politics
Hmm.
it continues that, particularly one side,
That's right.
I'll say, particularly cultivates that rural versus urban. And I don't, and maybe urban is code for black,
It absolutely is
you
code for
know,
black. It
like
absolutely
woke.
is. That's
Now
right.
it's code
That's right.
words.
That's right.
And these individuals often end up voting against their own best interest.
No
Because
doubt.
I think it was Lyndon Johnson said something to the fact of,
Sure did.
you know,
He sure did.
what is it?
He said if you can if you treat if you the
Lowest
lowest
white
white
man,
man will work
their
against
own
all of them.
self-interest,
That's
if
absolutely.
they think it's going to hurt.
That's right. That's
And
right.
and what I found that to be devastatingly true, because I look at all these folks
Hmm.
who vote against their interests all the time.
Hmm.
And now we're seeing some of it where we've gotten to that FO. You done messed around. Now you're finding out veteran benefits are now on the chopping block.
Hmm. Hmm.
Guess what?
Hmm.
Some of you voted for this guy.
That's right.
Um, when we start looking at the economy, the tariffs, how that's going to increase people's prices
That's right.
from groceries. Again,
That's right.
some of you
That's
voted,
right. That's right.
and I can't go. You voted because of policy
That's
because
right.
he said what he was going to do.
That's right. And not only did
That
he
is
say
what's
that,
new.
the day after the election, the number one
Can I
search
change?
word was, yeah, no, well, maybe that, but what is a tariff? What is a tariff?
So 90% of these folks
Didn't know what a tariff was.
out here voting against their own
That's right.
best interests
That's right.
and don't know that you just voted.
I've read dozens of articles that that are recounting stories of farmers now saying they're a little confused, or they're questioning what's going to happen to their future because of the tariffs and so forth. And you didn't understand. You didn't. This man, like you said, he was very clear about what he was going to do.
Jerry, you incorporate tariffs, you incorporate deportation, which we all know, depending on where you at, some of that labor is not being done.
That's right.
We know who the labor,
That's right.
and then some of those folks gone. So your prices go up. You don't have any more. You don't have a pipeline of people willing
That's
to
right.
do it for a low salary, a
That's
low
right.
fee. And now you're in this position going, well, what did we do? This is what you asked for.
That's right.
And there's this myth that most people don't know. And again, I hope we covered. What we got? 3 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That, and again, this is not something that's targeted towards farmers, but I think is one of the things you and I both want to do is cover these myths. And again, this is not all, but on whole, most people don't know farmers get the American economy. We give 50 to 60, 70 billion dollars.
And yes,
in fact, the median income for farmers tend to be more than the middle average median income for most of us.
That's right.
And so it's not this perception that they're all just broke and struggling. In fact, what when you start digging down into it, you see the black farmers are struggling.
That's right.
Because they don't get the same as some of my colleagues in the assembly would say, handouts.
That's right. That's right.
Subsidized by taxpayers.
That's right.
But the wealthier ones do.
That's
And
right.
again, there's data to talk about that. Let's close, man, and give you the last word on just this whole urban versus rural myth. And I think if we can get the speaker where you want to go, where you see us going with that, because I think it was a fascinating topic, man.
Absolutely. So I think that the speaker, she's a farmer, an urban farmer, can speak to the history of black farming and the black agrarian society, but also can help us tie in the pieces that you really skillfully put together. I think in the final analysis, black urban interests are not, and black interests period, are not all that different than urban interests. It's just that there, like you just said, there's a myth that somehow uh, middle America, the farming society, there's this romanticism that occurs that makes it okay to give them billions of dollars and we don't even call it welfare. We call it subsidy.
And it's the same thing that they complain about giving.
That's
It's the same thing.
Literally, I mean, maybe 1%, maybe 1% goes, maybe 1% of our spending goes, our state and national spending goes to black urban areas to support folks. But a larger share, and I'll have to take a look at exactly how much that is, but a much larger share goes to white rural areas to help subsidize them. And we haven't even started, to talk about the discrimination that you touched on that exists with black farmers and white farmers. We're still settling lawsuits as it relates to black farmers not being able to have loans that white farmers had, and have access to government loans that everybody should have been eligible for, but they weren't. So what I want to close the discussion by saying is, I think where we want to go, where I want to go, where I think we can go is just exploring that, but just establishing in the final analysis that we're more like than people are saying, are giving, giving life to, and I want to make sure that we bear that out.
And I'm hoping we do that, and I know we will. And I'm gonna put something else on the tail end of that. This idea and concept as an economic developer, I've had a number of people come and say, Jay, I'm worried about us having a food shortage, because you start to see farmers now, we're not growing as much stuff organically.
Yeah.
Now they're growing things from a lab. Like you can grow whole chickens and all kinds of stuff from DNA. But we're going to save that to the next discussion. You all make sure you follow us at Holla Black Podcast with David Hart and Jason Fields on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and be here for us. We'll make sure we put the dates and schedules of when we're going to be on. And we just want to thank you all for supporting us and appreciate every time you all subscribe to the channels.
Absolutely.
See you all soon.
Good night. Good night.